what's up, Eagle Point? Welcome back to the Eagle Point podcast. As you can tell, we're ready for Christmas. We have some Christmas music going. But this week, we're going to be talking about the week 8 of the Bible Essentials study. This is our final week in this study, and it's going to be on the general epistles. If you remember last week, we talked about Paul's epistles, and this week, we're going to be talking about the rest of them. So, Pastor Todd, give us an overview of the general epistles.
Sure. I guess we mentioned this last week. The word epistle actually means a letter or a message. You know, in the ancient world, especially in New Testament times, they didn't have a telephone, a cell phone, a computer, or internet. So the only way they could communicate with people in a different city or different region, whether it's an individual or a church or a group of people, their primary communication was written. So they had to write letters, write messages, which would be delivered by various messengers. So the word epistle is simply letters, messages that was written for, as in Paul's case, his epistles were written to specific churches, specific individuals. In the New Testament, 21 of our 27 books in the New Testament are epistles. 13 were written by Paul, and then 8 were written to just not specific individuals or specific churches. That's why they're called general epistles. Their audience was more broad, and these epistles, there's 8 of them written to more general or universal audience. Many of these epistles, the general epistles, were written to Jewish Christians who were scattered because of persecution. So there's a lot of topics, a lot of themes covered in our general epistles. I mean, from false teachers to suffering. And while each book has a different focus, as we read these books, we learn how to live in a world filled with trials, tribulations, and persecution. We learn that our faith will be tested by the trials of life. But in the midst of life trials, we can find joy and strength through our relationship with Christ.
All right. And, last week we only had one author. We had Paul. But, this week we're going to be talking about a lot of authors. So who are those authors, Scott? Some of them at least.
Well, as we look at the book of Hebrews, that's kind of one of those heavily debated deals. Traditionally, some have attributed it to Paul, but that's not necessarily right. They've also tried to attribute it to Barnabas and some others, maybe some later disciples or later followers of Christ as well. But Hebrews is about the fact that us being able to have a relationship with Jesus is so much better than a relationship with the law. Basically, trying to remind those Jewish Christians not to fall back into Judaism, but to trust Christ. Trust Christ. And then we've got James, and James wrote the book of James, and it's one of the most practical books that you can read in the New Testament, and it's just all about living out your faith practically. He's very to the point, right? I mean, for all the folks who love for people to say things clearly, James is a great book for us to read. Now, sometimes him saying it clearly stomps right on our toes, but he's that way. 1st and 2nd Peter were letters written by Peter, and that's, as Pastor Todd said, it talks a lot about suffering in there, that as Christians we're going to experience suffering, but that there is glory that will come when Jesus returns. So we see that he encourages faithfulness to Jesus as we await his triumphant return. And then 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, written by John, and he writes about the love that Christians should have for each other, and the fact that we should have obedience that we show toward Jesus through those books. Jude was written by Jude. It's about contending for the faith. It's about not falling away when false teachers teach things that are not true, knowing what those are and being on the lookout for them. Don't follow them. And then you've got Revelation that's kind of ending us there. And I know Pastor Todd's got some things to say about that in just a minute. Written by John. He was on the Isle of Patmos. He was being, he had been, what's the right word?
Exiled.
Exiled. I wanted to, it was a different word, so I'm glad you used that one. He'd been exiled there, and he wrote that book, and it kind of gives us hope about Jesus' glorious return and about the church, and a lot of good things there. So that letter was kind of written to 7 churches. but it also has some good overtones for the rest of us as well.
All right. And like Scott was saying, Todd, we get a little different kind of, I don't know, just book in general of Revelations than the other epistles. So what's kind of going on different there?
Well, I mean, the Revelation is probably the most mysterious and misunderstood book in the Bible. It is different from all the other books because it is both a revelation. It's not revelations. It is the revelation that God gave to John. So it's both a revelation or an unveiling, and it's also a prophecy. In Ephesians 6, Paul tells us, when he's talking about the spiritual battle that we're in, he describes an invisible world that impacts our visible world. He says there's a world we cannot see that's impacting the world that we can see. Remember he says we're to be, strong in the Lord and stand strong in Him, put on the full armor of God, because our battle is not against flesh and blood, it's against rulers and principalities and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So that's a spiritual world that's been at work throughout history that we cannot see. Well, in Revelation, God gives John a vision in which he kind of pulls back the curtain on this invisible world and allows John to see these spiritual forces that have been at work throughout history. These spiritual forces that are behind many of the trials and struggles that the church and us as individual Christians go through in our life. So the Revelation, it is an unveiling, a pulling back of the curtain, allowing John to see this spiritual world of things that's been going on throughout history. But it's also a prophecy of things that are yet to come. And through a series of symbolic visions, and that's why Revelation is sometimes very hard to understand because it has a lot of symbolism. John uses symbolic language, apocalyptic language that's very difficult sometimes for us to really understand. But through these symbolic visions, the Lord allows John to see the spiritual world, this spiritual reality behind the church's trials and struggles during the time between Christ's first and second coming. So these visions are given really to both warn the church of coming trials, coming tribulations, but also to strengthen the church to stand strong and stay pure as we await the return of Christ. The Revelation dramatically affirms the certainty of Christ's return and the victory that will be ours when He comes and establishes the new heaven and new earth.
All right. Well, all right, guys, that was our kind of overview for week 8, and that wraps up this study. So I hope that y'all have grown from this. I hope your knowledge of the Word at least has grown for this. Unless you're Scott. Scott knew all this coming in. He learned nothing.
Yeah, right.
He wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
No, but other than that, what's coming up in the church, Todd?
Well, this Sunday, as Trent said, we'll end this study, this Bible Essential study. We'll take the month of December and most of January off, and then we'll relaunch our second study, which will begin late January. We'll have 2 more studies in this Essentials series that we're going through, Faith Essentials and Life Essentials. So they'll be more practical than this. This has been more, I guess, in a sense, academic, classroom-type studies, but these next 2 will be more practical, more relevant just for our daily lives. So that's coming up. The 12th, we will be having our children's Christmas musical, which they're practicing on Wednesday nights, I think, and I have to verify this with Tracy, so don't mark this down as certain. I think the 8th will be the final Wednesday night for our children. As the 12th, they'll be presenting their Christmas musical, which is always a great day for our church. We'll have a full house that day. This Sunday, we'll be taking our Lottie Moon Christmas offering, which will go, every dime we give will be given to foreign missionaries for international missions. Sunday night, we'll have our final family meeting, which is our joint business meeting between both campuses. We'll be here at Eagle Point at 6 o'clock, so we encourage everyone to come and be a part of that meeting. And just looking forward to all the activities at Christmas. I don't know of anything else. If I missed anything, Scott, you can think of? Yes, I have. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. You should have, if you'll check your Facebook, Scott posted a message today on Facebook about our Advent. We're going to begin today reading through the Gospel of Luke. What we're encouraging everyone to do is read one chapter of Luke each day, preferably in the evening as a family. Sit down together, read the first chapter of Luke today, read a chapter of Luke every day up until Christmas, and then on Christmas Day we'll have a full understanding about the life, the ministry of Jesus, and it'll make our Christmas much more special and more worshipful as we honor the birth of our Savior.
All right.
Is that family meeting at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
6 probably 5. We will let you know for sure Sunday. Probably 5. So thank you for asking that in a nice way.
Well, all right, guys. That was our podcast this week. We hope to see you here Sunday, and we hope to see you back next time on the Eagle Point Podcast.